All right, so you guys have sent in a ton of research about tourism and sustainability.
Yeah.
It seems like you're really interested in this question of like, how much tourism is too much?
Yeah, it's a big question and an important one, is
For sure.
especially as people are starting to travel more again.
Totally. And to really dig into this, we're going to focus on
Yeah.
this 2012 paper that tackles this idea of carrying capacity.
Okay.
And I think it was you who sent this one in, listener Sarah.
It's a good one.
So basically, it's all about like how many tourists can a place handle
Yeah, all right.
before things start
He
to,
affords too much.
yeah, go south.
Right.
And get this, they actually applied this to a real place, the eastern Costa del Sol in Spain.
Oh, Spain.
I know. So we've got sunset sangria.
And sustainability.
Exactly.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, right. So to help us unpack all of this, we have an expert in tourism and sustainability research.
Hi.
So I guess maybe we should start with like a really basic definition.
Okay.
What exactly do we mean when we talk about carrying capacity?
Well, think of it like this.
Okay.
You've got a glass of water, right?
Right.
You keep pouring more and more water in, but at some point it's going to overflow.
Obvious.
Right. So that's kind of like carrying capacity.
Got it.
It's that limit.
So it's like how much a destination can handle before things start to break down.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just about the number of people.
Right, right.
There's more to it than that.
Okay, so it's not just about like if there are too many people on the beach.
No, it's much more nuanced than that.
Okay, so break it down for us.
Well, this study looks at three main types of carrying capacity. Physical,
Okay.
social, and then economic.
So it's kind of like a three-legged stool.
Yeah, I like that.
If one leg breaks, the whole thing collapses.
Exactly. So with physical capacity, we're talking about the actual stuff like infrastructure resources.
Okay.
So think like beaches, hotels, water supply,
All right.
all that stuff that tourists need and use.
Makes sense. What about social capacity?
Social capacity is all about the people.
Okay.
Like, how does tourism affect the folks who live there?
Right.
Their quality of life, their sense of community, their culture even.
Yeah. Like, are they being pushed out?
Right. Or are they benefiting?
Yeah.
And then economic capacity is looking at money.
Okay.
Jobs. How's the money being distributed?
Right. Like, who's actually benefiting from all this tourism revenue?
Exactly.
It's like you said, it's not just about how many people can physically fit in a place.
Right.
It's about all these interconnected pieces, the environment, the society, the economy.
Yeah, you got it.
And what's really cool is that this study took all these different types of carrying capacity and they applied them to a real place, the eastern Costa del Sol in Spain.
So they took this theory and actually put it to the test.
Exactly. They wanted to see how it played out in the real world.
Cool.
Yeah. And the Costa del Sol is a really interesting case study.
Mm-hmm.
It had this huge boom in tourism in the late 20th century.
Yeah, gorgeous beaches, sunny weather.
That is amazing.
It is beautiful.
I've always wanted to go.
You should.
But I can also see how all that growth, all those tourists, all that development,
Yeah,
it could put a strain on the region.
for sure.
So how did the researchers actually measure carrying capacity in a place like the Costa del Sol?
Oh, that's interesting.
Did they go around with a clipboard and count how many people were on the beach?
I mean, I wish.
Right.
That would be fun. But no, they used a whole bunch of different methods.
Okay.
So they did surveys of residents and tourists.
Oh, so they got both sides of the story.
Exactly. They wanted to know how people felt about things like crowding
Right.
and their quality of life, how satisfied they were.
That makes sense. What else?
They also looked at how the beaches were actually being used, like how crowded they were at different times of year.
Okay.
And they dug into the economic data, like hotel capacity, municipal budgets, employment numbers.
So they were trying to get a really complete picture.
Yeah, a holistic view.
Very cool. And all that data must have been pretty overwhelming.
A little bit, yeah.
So how did they make sense of it all?
Well, they use this framework called the DPSIR model.
DPSI.
Yeah, it stands for Driving Forces, Pressures, State Impacts, and Responses.
Okay, I think I remember reading about that in one of the articles.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah, it seemed pretty complex.
It is, but it's really helpful for understanding how everything's connected.
Okay, so break it down for us.
So in this case, tourism is the driving force.
Okay, because it's driving all these changes.
Exactly. It's putting pressure on the environment and society.
Right.
And that pressure leads to changes in the state of the destination.
Like what kind of changes?
Well, maybe there's more pollution, or maybe there's tension between residents and tourists.
Right, like those social and cultural impacts we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. And then those changes lead to impacts on the environment, the economy, people's lives.
Okay, so it's like a chain reaction.
Yeah. And the last part of the model is the responses.
Okay.
What are people doing to manage these impacts?
Like governments or businesses?
Yeah, or even just local communities.
So it's about understanding the whole system.
Exactly, the whole interconnected web.
So they crunched all this data, applied the DPSIR model.
Mm-hmm.
What did they actually find out about the Costa del Sol?
Well, the findings are a little nuanced,
Okay.
and they looked at it through two different lenses.
Okay.
Weak sustainability and strong sustainability.
Wait, there are different kinds of sustainability?
Kinda, yeah.
I thought sustainability was just, sustainability.
It's not that simple.
Okay, so what's the difference between, like, weak sustainability and strong sustainability?
Well, with weak sustainability, it's kind of like saying that it's okay to use up natural resources,
Like it's okay to pollute.
as long as you're making up for it in other ways, like economic growth.
Okay.
Strong sustainability says, no, some things are irreplaceable. You
Right.
can't just replace a forest with a shopping mall.
That makes sense. So under weak sustainability, you might look at the Costa del Sol and say, hey, the economy is booming.
Yeah,
It's all good.
right. But when you look at it through strong sustainability,
Oh,
that's when things get interesting.
okay. I'm on the edge of my seat.
And that's what we'll talk about after the break.
Stay tuned, folks. All right, so we're back, and we're looking at the Eastern Costa del Sol through these strong sustainability glasses.
Right.
What's the verdict?
Well, when you look at it that way, the study suggests that the region has likely exceeded its carrying capacity.
Whoa. So even a place as beautiful as the Costa del Sol can hit its limit.
Yeah. Even paradise has its limits.
It's kind of sobering when you think about it.
It is, especially if you care about the environment and the people who live there.
So what were some of the specific signs
Mm-hmm.
that the Eastern Costa del Sol might be exceeding its carrying capacity? Like, what were the red flags?
Well, one really interesting thing they did was create this carrying capacity map.
A map.
Yeah, it basically showed which areas were experiencing the most stress.
Okay, from tourism.
Right, and I bet you can guess where those stress points were.
Probably not the peaceful mountain villages.
You got it. It was the coastline. No.
Makes sense, everyone wants to be near the beach.
Exactly. That's where most of the tourism is concentrated.
But you also mentioned that they looked at the financial side.
Yeah, the municipal budgets.
And that's interesting because you'd think a place with so much tourism would be super wealthy.
You'd think so, right? But it's not always that straightforward.
So what did they find?
Well, they found that even though there was a lot of tourism revenue,
Okay.
it wasn't always translating into a better quality of life for the residents.
Wait, so more tourists, more money, but not necessarily a better life for the people who live there.
Yeah, it's complicated.
So where was all the money going?
It seems like a lot of it was being used to manage the impacts of tourism itself.
So it's like a vicious cycle.
Kind of, yeah. You need the tourism to get the money, but then you have to spend the money dealing with the consequences of having all those tourists.
Like what kind of consequences?
Think about things like maintaining infrastructure or managing waste, dealing with traffic.
Right.
And then there's environmental damage.
Mm.
All that stuff costs money.
So it's eating up a lot of that tourism revenue.
Exactly. And that leaves less money for things that would directly benefit the residents.
Like affordable housing or schools or healthcare.
Yeah, things like that.
It really makes you wonder, at what point does the cost of tourism outweigh the benefits?
That's the million-dollar question.
Sure.
And it's something a lot of places are struggling with.
So this is giving me a lot to think about in terms of my own travel choices.
Mm-hmm.
How can understanding this concept of carrying capacity help us make more informed decisions as travelers?
Well, I think it encourages us to think beyond just getting the cheapest flight or finding the most Instagrammable hotel.
Right.
It's about asking deeper questions about the places we visit.
So what kind of questions should we be asking?
We'll start with the basics, like what are the environmental impacts of tourism in this place?
Okay.
Are there signs of overcrowding? Are resources being strained?
Okay, then what?
Then think about the people. How are local communities benefiting from tourism?
Or are they being harmed?
Exactly.
Mm.
And then think about your own footprint. How could you travel more responsibly?
So it's about taking a more holistic approach.
Yeah, you got it.
And this whole idea of carrying capacity isn't just relevant to tourism, is it?
No, not at all. It applies to so many things.
Like what?
Well, think about city planning.
Okay.
How many people can a city actually handle before things start to break down?
Right before it becomes overcrowded and polluted.
Yeah, exactly. Or think about resource management. How much can we take from the earth without depleting it?
So it's really about understanding limits.
I think so, yeah. Both our own limit and the limits of the planet.
This has been so eye-opening.
Me too.
I
always learn something new when we do these deep dives.
But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about the Costa del Sol study.
Mm-hmm.
You said there were differences in how residents and tourists perceived crowding.
Oh, yeah, that was interesting.
Can you tell us more about that?
Well, basically, they found that a lot of residents felt like the region was overcrowded,
Okay.
but fewer tourists felt that way.
So it's like one person's crowded beach is another person's paradise.
Exactly. It shows that perspective really matters.
And I guess it makes sense if you're just visiting for a week or two.
Yeah, you might not notice the things that residents are dealing with every day.
But it's not like all the residents were totally negative about tourism.
Right. Not at all.
Okay.
Many of them have adapted to it, and some even see it as a positive thing.
Like it brings jobs and economic opportunities.
Right. It's not a simple issue.
Yeah, there are definitely two sides to the story.
And I think that's what makes this whole topic so fascinating.
It's not black and white. It's nuanced and complex.
Exactly.
And you also mentioned that even though the Costa del Sol was making all this money from tourism, it wasn't always being used in ways that benefited the residents.
Yeah, that was a key finding.
Can you remind us what was going on there?
Well, it seems like a lot of that revenue was being funneled back into managing the impacts of tourism itself.
So it's like they were stuck in this cycle of needing more tourism to pay for the problems caused by tourism.
Yeah, kind of a catch-22.
It makes you wonder, at what point does it become unsustainable?
That's a tough question, and there's no easy answer.
So much to think about.
I know, right?
This whole deep dive has really opened my eyes.
I'm glad.
So to wrap things up for our listeners today, what's the main message you want them to take away from all of this? What's the main message you want them to take away from all of this?
I think the biggest takeaway is that even paradise has its limits. Tourism can be amazing.
Yeah.
But there comes a point when it can actually start to do more harm than good.
Right, like that glass overflowing.
Exactly. And this study really shows us that, it's a reminder that we need to be careful about our impact as travelers.
So what can our listeners actually do differently? Like next time they're planning a trip, what should they keep in mind?
Well, I think it all starts with asking yourself those deeper questions.
Okay.
Like, how is tourism affecting this place? Are there ways I can travel more responsibly?
Yeah.
Can I support local businesses and communities?
So it's not just about, like, finding the cheapest flight or the fanciest hotel.
Right. It's about being more conscious about your impact.
So doing your research,
Yeah.
really thinking about where you're going and how you're traveling.
Exactly. And remember, it's not about feeling guilty.
Right.
It's about feeling empowered.
I like that.
The more you understand about the complexities of tourism,
Yeah.
the better choices you can make.
So it's about turning that awareness into action.
Exactly.
And those actions can be big or small.
For sure. Like maybe you choose to travel during the off season.
To avoid the crowds.
Right. Or maybe you stay in a locally owned hotel.
Okay.
Or even just being respectful of the local culture and customs.
Right. Every little bit helps.
Absolutely.
And this study focused on the eastern Costa del Sol. But this idea of carrying capacity, it applies everywhere, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's relevant to destinations all over the world.
From cities to islands to national parks.
And it's not just about tourism either.
Right. We talked about that.
It's about how we manage our resources.
Yeah.
How we plan our cities.
How we live our lives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about finding that balance.
Sustainability and balance. I like that. Well, this has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too. It's always a good reminder to think critically about these things.
So to wrap things up for our listeners,
Okay.
I want to leave them with a question.
Right.
Think about your favorite vacation spot. Is it at risk of exceeding its carrying capacity?
Good question.
What are some of the signs you should be looking for?
Well, think about the things we've talked about today. Like, are there signs of environmental damage?
Okay.
Like polluted beaches
Yeah.
or maybe the natural habitats are struggling?
Yeah.
Are there tensions between locals and tourists?
Okay.
Is the infrastructure overwhelmed?
Right. Like, are the roads and the airports and everything just packed?
Exactly. Those are all signs that a place might be reaching its limits.
It's a lot to think about.
It is, but it's important.
Yeah, because we want to be able to enjoy these places for years to come.
Absolutely. Sustainable tourism is all about finding that balance, where we can experience these amazing places, but also protect them.
Well said. This has been a fascinating deep dive into the world of tourism and sustainability.
It really has.
Huge thanks to you for sharing your expertise with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to all of you listening out there, keep those deep dive requests coming. Until next time, happy travels.